Hi guys, I just wanted to make a few comments on the actions and debate in the EU over President Duterte and, of course, these alleged EJKs. As I've said before, in order for a EJK to have actually taken place, it means it must be state sponsored or state inspired. Not once has President Duterte given any money, not once has the Philippine government offered any money to kill any person whatsoever. Yes, there has been a massive problem with drugs. There were over 4 million people addicted to Shabu before President Duterte came in office, and thanks to his efforts and thanks to the clamping down on the war on drugs, drugs in the Philippines have lessened. Millions of pesos worth of Shabu has been seized, countless drug dens have been shut down, and the Philippines is a much safer place than it was previously. Now, the EU want to meddle in that process. The EU seem to think that they have a right to get involved in that. What I have to say to the EU, why don't you go in the Philippines? Why don't you live in the Philippines? How were things before President Duterte? I heard stories of people being scared to walk around their own barangay at night. There were carjackings, murders, rapes, so many different crimes that happened in the Philippines. People were scared to go out. There was rampant corruption and so many other serious issues. Since President Duterte, he said before he even got elected in his election mandate that he would clamp down. He would have his war on drugs to make the Philippines a safer place for the Filipino people, a safer place for Filipino children so that they can receive education rather than being forced to sell drugs or rather than being not taken to school because their parents are on drugs. Certainly, the Philippines is going in the right direction. Yes, I accept there's still more to be done, and yes, I accept that things are not perfect. But the EU needs to understand that the softly approach did not work. You know, the liberal approach of just let people do their own thing and don't really deal with the drug situation was not working in the Philippines. The Philippine people had had enough. The overwhelming majority of Filipinos wanted change. They were desperate for change. And the mandate of President Duterte to eradicate the Philippines of illegal drugs in 6 months was one of the key factors in him getting elected. Since his election, obviously, he hasn't managed to completely eradicate the drugs in the Philippines in that period of time. However, he didn't realize the extent of the problem. He didn't realize how bad the drugs problem had become in the Philippines. But I can say one thing. If the Filipino people weren't pleased with their president, why does he not have a rating that some other leaders around the world have, i.e., 30%, 40%, 50%? No. President Duterte has a rating of over 80% of Filipinos. This means whatever he's done, and despite not being able to fulfill all of his promises due to the massive extent of the drug problem, he still has a very high popularity rating. So many Filipinos admire what he's doing in the Philippines, and so many foreigners like myself admire the work that he's doing to keep our families safe, to keep the Filipino people safe. And now the EU is somehow listening to the words of Maria Ressa and somehow listening to her, what she's saying about there being no democracy, no freedoms, and human rights abuses and EJKs or whatever she's saying. Yeah, and then they're saying that there was some trumped up charges, and the latest conviction of Maria Ressa was on a trumped up charge. That's completely false. Maria Ressa was convicted due to a libel case by a Philippine businessman, and due to an article that she published several years ago. This was not something that the government organised. President Duterte didn't say to that businessman, I'll tell you what, let's prosecute Maria Ressa. Not at all. This was not the case. This was a law which, in fact, some Philippine lawyers actually want removed, that makes you criminally liable for a libel case. And unfortunately, Maria Ressa has fallen a victim to that. It's the Philippine justice system. The Philippines is an independent, sovereign nation, and I really don't believe that the EU have any place whatsoever to meddle in Philippine justice. How would they like it if President Duterte went to the EU and said, let's free this criminal, or let's free that criminal, or let's drop all the charges against this person or that person? I don't think it has any business of the EU. And now the EU is talking about trade in the Philippines and some kind of sanction or levy or dropping some kind of agreement. You know, would the EU really want the Philippine people to suffer even more? Already, due to the lack of jobs, due to the coronavirus pandemic, and due to all the difficulties the Philippines is facing right now, already there are lack of opportunities in the Philippines. And again, this is due to coronavirus, and this is due to people not paying the right taxes. Would the EU want the Filipino people to suffer even more? They are calling on an investigation. And yes, I think they have a right to speak out. But the problem is they're actually, because of course we all enjoy freedom of speech, we all enjoy this big democracy and human rights and everything else. But I have to say they are sadly misinformed. They've been told some mistruths by Maria Ressa. She's going around to other countries and she's making the Philippines look bad internationally. But the fact is, since President Duterte came into office, poverty is down, corruption is down, crime is down by more than 50%, and the Philippines is going in the right direction. The Filipino people are very pleased with what's happening in the country right now, and I don't think this meddling by the EU is helpful. You know, personally, I voted for Brexit, and the reason why I voted for Brexit is this. I have never agreed that there's a body in Europe who are calling the shots, changing the laws and making the laws, and yet I never voted for them. How can it be right that these people are in power and they've got billions and billions of pounds every year or euros? And, you know, as a British taxpayer, as a British citizen, I never voted for these people. So I can say this as I conclude this video: not in my name. This prompt for a investigation by the Commission on Human Rights is not something that I agree with, not something that I don't believe is necessary. You know, there are freedoms in the Philippines, and the Filipino people do have democracy, they have justice, there is a perfectly functioning justice system. When it has been found out that there have been some killings that were, if you like, down to corruption, you know, down to rogue police officers. Take the case of Keon De Los Santos, who was murdered by some police officers. He was apparently shot in the back, although I do not know the circumstances. But what I can say is this: when police officers don't carry out the right duties, when there is some kind of wrongdoings, it is properly investigated and those responsible are brought to justice. Yes, I accept there has been a sad loss of life from people who have been involved in the war on drugs. Apparently there are about 5,500 people who've been killed during drug or illegal drug operations, meaning to say they got in the way of, they had guns or knives, or they came up against the police, or they were fighting the police and the police had to use self-defense. And yes, there are some other deaths under investigation. I have no doubt that there are rival drug gangs, rival drug dealers, corrupt police, even some corrupt officials. But the fact is that President Duterte is weeding them out. President Duterte has said that he will come down very hard on those who are breaking the law, but those who are supporting the law or complying with the law, he will give them full protection, and that's what you would expect from the president. President Duterte is like a father to the Philippine people. He's very much loved, he's very much respected, he's very much admired by the overwhelming majority of the Philippine people. If you go by these surveys, which I do, which anyone would harness or grab onto the popularity surveys, bearing in mind there are 100 million Filipinos in the Philippines, if not more, President Duterte has a popularity rating of 80%, meaning that 80 million Filipinos appreciate President Duterte, appreciate what he's doing. And yes, there are some who don't agree with him and don't agree with his methods, and that's a democracy. But President Duterte made it very clear that he would be happy to meet his bashers. He's very happy to engage with people who don't agree with him. So thanks guys for watching this, and to the EU, I have this message. Please don't get involved in something you don't know about. Please don't make things worse, and please don't listen to fake news about what's happening in the Philippines, because the fact is the Philippines is going in the right direction. Thank you guys.